everyone, and welcome to Cooking with Claire. This is part of an initiative that's from Jewish Leads Online, and welcome to my 6th cooking session. This session's on a webinar courtesy of Alan Benstock, who's doing all the technical wizardry, and Milim, who provided me with the webinar. So thank you very much. I'm very grateful. So today we are going to be learning how to make spicy lentil soup and French chocolate cake with a ganache. It's also known as Reine de Saba or Queen of Sheba cake. I absolutely adore this cake. I can't lie, the reason why I'm making it is because it gives me the opportunity to have it in the house. So what we're going to do today is we're going to start off, I'm going to demonstrate how to make the soup, how to make the cake, how to decorate the cake, and then this is the first time we're going to see how it works. We're going to lay the floor open to everybody, and everybody gets a chance to ask their questions in person. You can talk, but if you don't want to talk, you can send a message through chat, and I'm hoping that Alan is going to then pass it on to me if it's something that's relevant to what I'm doing at the moment, and I can pass on a response. So let's get started. Spicy lentil soup is probably one of my family's favourite soups, and the reason for this is, number one, uber delicious, number 2, really filling, number 3, very healthy. So what's not to love? So I'm going to start off. It's quite a simple, easy soup to make. I made this recipe up myself based on the flavour of a soup we ate in a restaurant some time ago, and everybody loved it so much I just had to give it a go. So here goes. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn the screen down to the chopping board so that you can see what I'm doing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've got a lovely large onion here, and I'm going to chop this onion up into small pieces. This soup is not going to be liquidized, so I really want to make the pieces quite small, so it's not, I don't want it to be a big, thick, chunky soup. Right, easiest way to chop up an onion into fine pieces is you chop off the pointy end and you leave the hairy end with the roots at the top. You chop straight through the roots and turn the onion on its side. Now, if you peel back the peel, it should be quite easy at this point. Hold the peel in your left hand, that's if you're right-handed, otherwise you do it the other way around. And you do 1 or 2 cuts horizontally, and then you need to do lateral cuts, just straight down, all the way across, and then if you cut at right angles to those cuts, you'll end up with some lovely small pieces of onion. And just these little end bits that I've just chopped because I hate wasting anything. Right, so that's half the onion done. I'm just going to pop that into a container. Try and get rid of all the little hairy bits. They're just onion roots. They won't do you any harm, but they're not very nice. Don't add anything to the mix, I can assure you. Right, so I'm just going to do the other half of the onion. Right, now this soup does call for rather a lot of garlic in it. I'm going to add 3 cloves of garlic to this soup. You do not have to add that much garlic in. In fact, if you don't like the taste of garlic, you can just omit the garlic altogether. But I personally think that the garlic in the soup gives it a really lovely mellow flavour because it cooks down in the soup. In fact, I even sometimes add a little bit of garlic later at the end of cooking, which I'll show you afterwards. Right, so here we go. We have our finely chopped onion. There we go. Right, so we'll pile all the onion into a dish and put it aside and get on to the next thing that we need to put inside our soup. Right, now the next thing I'm going to chop is a red pepper. You could use a green pepper if you wanted. Personally, I don't like green pepper. I find it's very bitter and I don't think it's nice in the soup, but it is according to taste. I reckon red or yellow is the best. And I'm just going to chop it very finely, well, reasonably finely. If you like a really rough, rustic sort of soup, you can certainly chop it into larger pieces. But I personally rather like it like this. Alan, there's a question on the chat. Does anybody want to ask me anything pertaining to what I'm doing now? You there, Alan?
Oh. I'm here, yeah. No questions yet.
So there's something written on the chat. Is that nothing to do with what I'm doing now?
No, it was a message from Susie Nyman saying hi.
Oh, hi, Susie. Nice to have you watch, and thank you for all your lovely comments on Facebook. I do appreciate them. Right, so we're virtually there with the red pepper. The next thing I'm going to tackle is that lovely garlic. Like I say, I'm going to be doing 3 cloves of garlic. It's an awful lot. Now, what you can do, if you really like your garlic, is at the very end of cooking, if you finely grate or chop another clove of garlic and just pop it in a pan with a tablespoon of olive oil, and then just until it's warmed through and you can smell the lovely aroma of the garlic coming through, you then pour that on the top of the soup just before serving, and that gives it a real kick. It's absolutely gorgeous. Please excuse me, I'm just struggling to get these cloves out of this garlic. Now, I tend to use the flat of my blade to squish the garlic a bit, then I can chop the blunt end off, and the paper should just peel off very, very easily, which it does do. Other people have got other methods. I think I learned this method when I was a newlywed and I used to come in from work and watch Ready, Steady, Cook. That's what taught me most of my abilities. And right, so here we have 3 very different size garlic cloves. And personally, I'm not so keen on it being chopped, and I don't have a garlic crusher. So what I do is I use a microplane and I just grate it along the microplane to give me very, very finely grated chunks of garlic. But you can just chop your garlic up. That will work absolutely fine. It's no problem whatsoever. Or, as I said, if you really don't like the taste of garlic, just omit this part completely all on its own, and it will still be gorgeous. What I haven't mentioned is in the background behind me, what you can't see, is that I have a pan with 200 grams of lentil vert. They're also known as puy lentils, or they're very similar to puy lentils. I think puy lentils have to have come from a specific region to be called puy, but they're lentils that look like this. And I'm actually simmering them in the background in cold water. I've been simmering them for about 20 minutes, and by now this should be nicely softened. I'm ready for the next part of the demonstration. Right, I'm just going to have to wash this garlic off my hands. Apologies, but they are sticky. Right, so next I'm going to get my spices ready. And again, you don't have to add all the spices that I'm adding. But this is the flavour that we particularly like in my family. So here we have 1 teaspoon of cumin, which I think is just about one of my favourite spices. There we go, that's 1 teaspoon of cumin. And then we need, I think it's half a teaspoon of paprika. To find my spoons, there we go. Half a teaspoon of paprika. There we are. See it in the bowl. And then we have a 1/4 teaspoon of dried chilies. Like I say, you can add as much or as little as you like. My family do like a good bit of a kick. Okay. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring the computer over to the cooker. There we are. Okay, now what I've got over here, I'm just going to show you, it's been simmering nicely, is a pan of lentils. These are the lentils, 200, probably a bit more than 200 grams of lentil vert, and they've been covered in cold water, and I've been simmering them for about 20 minutes. What I love about these lentils is that they actually hold their shape beautifully, so that they don't fall to pieces when you have your soup, and you get the lovely texture. So we're going to start off with here is I'm going to heat the pan up, shall get hold of my spatula. And here I've got my olive oil. I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of olive oil in here. You can add less if you want, but the flavour won't be quite as good. And I shall get all my pre-prepared vegetables and spices here. And salt. Right, here we go. So, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in my onions. And we'll just saute these off until they start to soften. This won't take very long. Right, so they're simmering nicely. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add in the red peppers after this, once they've softened just a little bit, because I want the red peppers to soften too, because personally, I think that the flavour intensifies if you cook them before you add the water and the stock. So, next thing I'm going to do is add my peppers. This is all starting to sizzle nicely. I've got the pan set at quite a high temperature. Okay. So I don't want to add the garlic and the spices just yet. I think if you add the garlic and the spices at this stage, then they can get kind of burnt flavour. It can spoil the flavouring of it. You want to add it towards the end of the frying, just so that the heat and the oil will help to release the flavour of the spices and the garlic. And then we will add the rest of the ingredients. Now, the way I make this soup is I boil up the lentils first. And the reason being that if you try and boil up lentils with anything that has salt in or any flavour, then it will cause the lentils to toughen and harden and they'll never soften. It also, even if you're just making it in the soup early on and you've got other ingredients there, I find it takes an awful lot longer and you just don't get as good a texture. So what I tend to do is I'll make all the sauce up first, all the flavouring part of the soup, and then I add the lentils to the soup. Now, here's an interesting point. This sauce, the sauce that you have before you add the lentils to, if you make a double amount, you can actually take half of it off, and that could be used as a base for a lasagna, or you could use it, you could puree it and have it as a pasta sauce. It's equally good for that. It's extraordinarily versatile. It's a really, really lovely recipe. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you what the vegetables look like inside the pan. They're starting to soften and they're starting to colour. And they're starting to release a lovely aroma. So, next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to add my garlic. Here we go. Yeah, I'm giving that a good stir, and immediately that fabulous smell of the garlic is wafting up, and it's extremely aromatic. Now, the next thing I'm going to add is all those spices that I showed you before. So that is the paprika, the chili and the cumin. I mean, you could add ground coriander if you like that flavour. Now, because I've added flaked chili, I'm going to take my head well out of the way of the smoke and steam that's coming out the pan, because unfortunately, if you're cooking chili flakes and that steam gets in your face and in your eyes, it will sting and it might make you cough and choke. So just be a little bit careful when you're using chili flakes or fresh chili. If you don't have chili flakes or don't like chili flakes, you could certainly use fresh chili, and you would add that at the same time as you add your peppers. Right, so here it's all now, all these wonderful scents, smells are rising out of the pan. And what we're doing is we're cooking off the spices and the garlic to release their flavours and enhance them. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a can of chopped tomatoes. Yeah. Here's my can of chopped tomatoes. So I'm adding them now, and I'm adding them at this point because I don't want the spices to start burning and turn bitter. So I've added in the tomatoes. I'm going to bubble them down a bit. That's got bubbling nicely now. Now, at this point, I have to say it's quite a bitter mixture. It's quite, not bitter, it's sour. And that's because of the tomatoes. And I think it does need a little bit of sweetness at this point. Better, you can definitely do this without adding sugar, or I suppose you could add sweeteners, you could add stevia or whatever else it is that you would normally add to sweeten things without sugar. But personally, I think a couple of teaspoons of sugar is in order here. It's still a lot less sugar than you find in commercial soups. And I'm going to add a teaspoon of salt. There we go. Okay. So here's my salt. I'm going to add a teaspoon of salt here. There we go. Give that a good stir. You do need to have enough salt, sugar, flavourings to give this a really good whack, because you're going to be adding all of those lentils later. Right, I'm going to put in about 10 grains of black pepper at this point. Again, if you don't like pepper, you don't have to add it, but I think it might spoil the flavour or make it less interesting and complex. And I'm going to add a little bit of tomato puree to this, about a couple of tablespoons. So just squirting this in. What I'll do is I'll show you what it looks like. So this is what it looks like now. You can see that sizzling and simmering away. I'm just going to add in that tomato puree. Now the tomato puree has the effect also of slightly thickening this up. Right, so simmering beautifully there. I think that's all the flavourings added. I'm just going to check my recipe sheet, see what I've told you. Yes. Now, what you can do at this point, completely up to you, but you can get hold of kosher Marmite. And I think a teaspoonful of kosher Marmite gives a certain umami taste. It's really nice. And again, you don't have to add it. I think it adds to the flavour. So I'm just going to add a teaspoonful, probably not even a full teaspoon, just maybe even half a teaspoon of Marmite. Put that in. There we are. And now this is such a lovely, thick, luscious sauce. And it will taste wonderful. So I'm just going to show you that I might actually tip this up so that you can see what it looks like in the pan. It's simmering, it's sizzling, it's a lot thicker. And at this point, I'm going to add my lentils. Now the lentils are all fully cooked. I've checked them and they are soft. They're still warm, but they're soft. And I've given them a good 20, 25 minutes to cook. Now, what you can do, and I often do this, is I will save on gas by cooking up a whole maybe 500 grams of lentils, and I will freeze half of them, drain them and freeze half of them, and then they're ready in the freezer for the next time I want to make this soup. Now I really want you to see what the soup looks like at this point before I've added the stock, and it's more like a stew than a soup. I'm just wanting you to see it without me getting too close. Don't want my keyboard getting splattered. There we go. So it's quite thick, and actually at this stage, if you cooked it off for a little bit longer, you could serve it with rice as a main course, as a stew, a kind of a dal, and it is utterly delicious. I've had it like that before. What I'm going to do is add in about a litre of hot water. There we go. It's lovely. And I'm going to give that a stir. I'm going to add in a couple of stock cubes, vegetable stock cubes, and then I'm going to leave this simmering for about 20 minutes, 20, 30 minutes, and it will, by the end of it, have amalgamated as a soup. So I'm going to pop this, bring it up to the boil. I'm going to pop it onto the back burner, and then I'm going to show you how to make the next dish while this is simmering, the flour-free chocolate cake, which is also known as a Queen of Sheba cake or Reine de Saba. So let me just put this onto the back flame, which I shall do now. I'm going to leave it simmering uncovered. And I'm just going to put this on a low light, leave it simmering uncovered, and then I shall clear my decks and get ready for the next part of what we're going to do. So here we go. Right, so that is pretty much, yes.
While you do that, while you get it organised, a couple of questions we've had sent message through.
Lovely, thank you, Alan.
It says, can you freeze the soup?
Yes, soup freezes absolutely beautifully. In fact, my kids think it tastes better once it's been defrosted than it did before we even started. So that's really good. Next question.
Susie Nyman asks, can you use tinned lentils?
You can. If you use, can you hear me? If you use tinned lentils, then you don't need to do the boiling section at the beginning. You can just go straight into frying up the vegetables and then making the sauce and then adding the lentils to it. There we go.
And finally, one anonymous attendee asks, do you need to soak the lentils beforehand?
Not if you're boiling them up. If you're going to make them, literally just making it all together, maybe making the sauce and not adding any salt or stock cubes to it, which you can do, you would be wise to soak your lentils first for about an hour in hot water from the kettle. But I highly advise that you do boil it up first. Or you can actually buy bags of ready cooked pre-lentils and lentil there. I think you can get them from the supermarket. I've seen them around. Quite a few supermarkets do them, so that's good. Right, any more questions while we're at it?
Not for the moment.
Right, well, I'm going to wash the garlic off my hands because I'm starting on the cake now, and the last thing I want is a garlic-flavoured cake. So, here we go. Right, my favourite cake in the whole wide world. This makes me so happy making this cake. This is my Queen of Sheba cake. So, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to separate out 4 eggs. So I'm going to bring the screen down to hand level. Make sure you can see what I'm doing. So here we have a bowl. We've got a good enough view there. There we go. Right, so I've actually got 2 bowls here. A stray lentil too. The bowl that I'm going to do my egg whites in, because I have to separate 4 eggs, has to be squeaky clean. It has to be so clean, and there has to be absolutely no fat in there whatsoever. If there is any fat in that bowl, the egg whites will not thicken up, they won't firm up, and you won't get it. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to separate out my eggs. Now I've got 2 glasses here to do this. This is because as a good Jewish woman, I need to check my yolks for blood spots. So I'm going to start off cracking the egg, and I'm going to hold the yolk in one hand, and then I'm going to pop it through to the other hand. There we go, until I've got rid of all of the whites. There we are, it's all gone. Lovely. I'm going to pop the yolk in the big glass, and I'm going to check it to make sure that there's no blood spots. Well, there is not a blood spot in sight, so my yolk gets to go in this little dish, and the white of the egg gets to go in the big dish. Right, I'm going to do this 4 times. So if you've got any more questions, you're welcome to ask while I'm doing my separating. Did you get any more questions, Alan?
Yes. Has it followed up? Can you serve the soup with croutons, naan, soup mendels, or anything?
Yes. So now, this is an interesting question. I rather like this one. So it's lovely to be served up with any form of bread, crusty bread, naan bread, whatever else you want to do. Right, this is fine. That's egg number 2. But now my family do put croutons into their soup, which is fine. But what you will find, it's quite a thick soup to begin with. And if you add croutons, mandels to your soup, what you will end up with is a very, very thick soup. It will possibly turn solid. You might get to the point where you can actually stand your spoon up in the soup. So it's completely up to you. If you don't mind having your soup go incredibly thick, by all means add your mandel or make the soup more watery. That is another option. You could always add more water and more stock. Right, that's 3 eggs, and we're just going to do the final egg now. Ooh. Sorry, bear with me. I did not crack this one very well. I'm hoping I don't end up breaking the yolk. So what I'm going to do is a bit of a messy way of doing this here. I'm actually going to pour the yolk directly into my fingers and let the whites drip through. Get a good squeeze just so that all the whites can go through like that. And I'm going to pour. Oh, I do get very messy hands that way. Right, fine. I use white eggs because the chances of getting a blood spot in a white egg are far, far fewer than in a brown egg. I'm not quite sure why. I think it's because they get checked through an X-ray machine, or not an X-ray machine, but a machine with light to see if there's any in beforehand. And I buy my eggs from the gourmet just to make sure that I can get the white eggs. I've never seen them for sale anywhere else. Right, I'm going to get rid of these egg shells. And the next step is the part where we actually need to go back to the cooker. So I'm going to move you across to the cooker because what we're going to do now is we're going to melt 4 ounces. I think that's 125 grams of butter. Let me just find where's my butter. There we go. So here I have, this is leftover butter from Pesach, as you can see. It's my lovely rose butter. So what I'm going to do now is, in fact, I'm going to cover up my soup so that it's out the way. Right, so I've got my butter in the pan. I'm going to turn it onto a low light and I'm going to gently melt the butter. Now, the way that we're going to make this cake is, this cake has 6 ounces, that's I think 175 grams of good quality chocolate chips. You want dark chocolate and you want the best quality you can get hold of. But I think to go above 55% cocoa solids will make your cake a bit more dry. So I think about 55%. I think the kosher chocolate chips, the Lieber's ones that we had at Pesach, made the perfect made the perfect chocolate cake. So what I'm doing now is I am melting the butter. Once the butter's melted, then I get to add sugar, the vanilla, and the chocolate chips. So that is 4 ounces, 125 grams of caster sugar, 6 ounces, that's 175 grams of chocolate chips, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla. This is a nice vanilla and it has a hechsheron, which is very useful. So I'll just get my teaspoon measure for the vanilla. So I'm just waiting at the moment for the butter to melt, but I don't want it to get too high. Now, thing that you really need to be aware of when you're working with chocolate. Chocolate does not like to be rushed, and it definitely does not like to be overheated. If you get your pan really hot when you're melting your butter, and then you add your chocolate and your sugar while the pan is really hot, the chocolate will do a horrible thing. It will separate, which is what that means is that the solids and the liquids in the chocolate will separate out, and you'll end up with a stodgy mess that you cannot do anything with. This has happened to me in the past. I had to throw it out, and that was the waste of the most gorgeous chocolate and butter and sugar, and it was completely unusable. I'm just jiggling this around a bit to speed up the cooling down process, sorry, the melting process. What I am going to do, actually, to speed it up even more, is I'm just going to use my spatula to cut into the butter. And what I should have done probably was cut the butter into little pieces so that it would melt a little bit faster. That would be absolutely fine. But it is melting very nicely now. So I can just, you can see that. Tip it down a little more. And you can see the butter melting in the pan. I'm not quite sure why this is my favourite cake. It's faffy to make. You've got to separate out your whites and your yolks of your egg. You've got to beat them up, the whites up separately. But the end result of this cake is unbelievably good. And I really and truly think that it's worth the effort to make this cake because it's so utterly, utterly delicious. Right, my butter is just about melted now. There's a tiny, tiny little bit. I'm going to agitate it to help the melting process along. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add my caster sugar. So that's 125 grams of caster sugar, which I weighed out before. There we go. I'm just going to pour that in. And I'm also going to add my 175 grams which is 6 ounces of chocolate chips. And at this point, I'm also going to add 1 teaspoon. Oh, hang on, is that a teaspoon? No, that's a half a tablespoon. Bear with me, my teaspoon needs washing. I'm just going to wash my teaspoon. And I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla essence. Now, if you don't have vanilla, you don't have to add it. I think it just adds to the general all-over flavour. Another trick you need to know about this cake is it must not be overcooked. If you overcook this cake, it'll come out just like a cookie. And what a waste that is. Now, what's happening is I've got the cooker set on the absolute lowest level it can possibly be at. And I hardly need any heat at all. The residual heat in the butter will pretty much cause the chocolate to melt. Now, you don't have to use chocolate chips. You can use a bar of chocolate. The ganache chocolate that you can get from Gourmet makes a fabulous cake. I particularly like that chocolate. And that chocolate, it comes in a big bar, and what you need to do is break it up, but it doesn't break up that easily into pieces. So you might still be left having to take a big sharp knife and chop it up. So for ease and pure laziness, I tend to use chocolate chips. It's slightly more expensive, but it's an awful lot easier. Right, so what you need to do is you need to melt, keep going until all the chocolate's melted. Now, what I'm going to do now, there's still a few little lumps and bumps. I don't know if you can see the odd lump in there, but there's a residual heat inside this pan. So I'm going to let that residual heat keep going and melting until all the chocolate is melted. And the reason for this, I'm so scared of overcooking it that I'd much rather have it a little bit under than a little bit over. Right, so at this point, we need to add our 4 egg yolks, and also we're adding potato flour. The potato flour is what you'd use instead of regular flour, and it has 1 teaspoon of baking powder added to it. So first of all, I'm going to break up the egg yolks so that they're actually running now, and I'm going to scrape them into the chocolate, and I'm going to very, very quickly mix that in. The last thing in the world that I want is scrambled eggs. So I want to make sure it's properly combined. If you have this chocolate mixture too hot, your egg yolks will scramble as they go in. So I've got the bulk of them in there. I'm just going to scrape the very last few bits in. In effect, what you're making here is a chocolate mousse that you're going with a little bit of potato flour that you're going to bake. Right, now I'm going to add all of my potato flour and my baking powder. And I'm going to have to scrape it out. Potato flour sticks like crazy. I love this dish so much. I tend to buy extra potato flour at Pesach, and I'm fairly certain there's quite a bit left from Pesach that you can buy if you want to make this cake. So, because I haven't had anything too hot, I've got a lovely, runny, smooth mixture here that I'm just going to set on the side while I beat up my egg whites. So I just want to get rid of any last lump in here of the potato flour, because if you don't get rid of the lumps, you really do need to mix it properly. If you don't get rid of the lumps, you'll have lumps of potato flour in the actual cake, which is not very pleasant. And it is such a good cake, it would be a shame to spoil it. Right, so now we get on to the next part.
While you're just moving across,
I'm moving it. Yeah, sorry, have you got another question?
Yes, Valerie Baum asks, can we use sugar-free chocolate?
I've never tried it, but it's probably worth giving it a go. I don't know how sugar-free chocolate melts, but I imagine you could get away with sugar-free chocolate. Right, so in here, from before, I've got my 4 egg whites, scrupulously clean bowl, and I am just going to add a little bit of salt. So you only need a pinch of salt. So I'm just going to literally pour a bit into my hand and pop a pinch in there. Lovely. So here's my pinch of salt. Don't ask me why. I honestly don't know. I'm sure there's a reason. If anybody knows the reason, please add it to the chat and you can tell me later. This is what I've been told. Now, be warned, I'm going to be turning on the mixer. So I've got my my hand mixer here. If you've got a Kenwood or a KitchenAid or whatever, it's the same thing. You want it on the beaters and you want to start off at a slow setting until it becomes frothy, and then you can build up. And what we're looking for is when you get to the stiff, glossy peak. And I'll show you what that looks like. Right, the clicking you can hear in the background is because I've just put my cooker on because I need to preheat the oven. Now, what I'm doing here is to show you what stage we're at here, which is where we've got floppy peaks. They're not stiff peaks, they're not holding their shape. So we're almost there, but not quite, which means we need to go on for about another 10-15 seconds. Right, let's see, have we reached stiff? Yeah, we now have stiff glossy peaks. What you're looking at is that it doesn't move in the bowl. I could tip it up above my head, but I'm not really prepared to. Okay, so watch out for a loud noise. I'm just going to get the mixture off the beaters. So literally all that's in there is a little bit of salt and some egg whites. Now, what I get to do is my lovely unctuous chocolate mix, which I don't think you can see the texture of it there, but it's still beautifully runny and mixable. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to pour this into my egg whites mix, every last bit. And the reason why I'll use a spatula as much as anything is that there's no mixture left in the pan. Now, if my kids are around, I have to make sure I do leave, well, certainly my youngest one, I do have to leave a little bit of mixture in the pan because he loves to taste it. He likes to lick out the bowl afterwards, and who doesn't? Right, so what I'm doing now is I'm folding the mixtures in together. I'm folding the chocolatey mixture into the egg mixture. Now, the way I'm doing this, as you can see, I'm bringing my spatula through the middle and cutting through it, and then drawing it round to the edge while drawing the mixture that's at the bottom round to the sides. And at first, it looks like it's never going to come together. It looks absolutely revolting. It's like something someone spat out. But if you just keep working on this and working on it, making sure that you can't just mix it. If you mix it, you're going to knock all the air out of it, and your cake will be flat as a pancake. And what you're trying to do is to combine the two mixtures together without losing too much of your air. So as I'm still going, and I'm waiting until the mixture is completely even throughout, and I can see there's a lump of egg white in there. I'm desperate to get amalgamated. There it is. You can see it there. So let's get that amalgamated. So I'm just going to keep going. There's still a little bit left in the bottom. Now it's best to do, if you can make this cake in a glass bowl, then you can see at the bottom if you've got any of the mixture, which will show up much darker, the chocolatey mixture that's left to combine. And the second you feel it's all combined, you stop. Right, so what I've done is I've preheated my oven to gas mark 4, which is the equivalent of 180 degrees C, and I think that's 350 F. Yeah, 350 F. There we go. And there's the mixture. This is exactly what it should look like before it goes into your prepared tin. What you need is an 8-inch round tin. I like to use a springform tin, makes it easier to get out, and I always line it. Now I find these pre-made liners are very, very handy. You definitely need something to stop it from sticking, in my opinion. If you weren't going to use a liner, you could grease it, but you might still find it sticking. This is an incredibly soft cake. So I'm pouring my cake mix into my tin. There we go. And I'm going to set the timer for 30 minutes. Now, it might not be cooked in 30 minutes, but the worst thing you can do with this cake, as I've said before, is to overcook it, because it will just be revolting. I got this cake recipe from the Evelyn Rose cookbook that I was bought by my mum just before I got married. So that book is now falling to pieces, but for 27 years plus, it's doing extremely well. So just going to wash the stickiness off my hands. Right, and at this stage, I'm going to pop this cake into the oven and set the timer for 30 minutes. Now, it's ready when a gentle touch, it's firm to a gentle touch, but it really does need to be only a very gentle touch. And when it comes out of the oven, it should have a slight dome on the top, which, once you've taken it out and cooled it, the dome will drop slightly. And this is one that I made earlier. So this is what your cake will look like when it comes out of the oven. So it will have had a dome, and because it's then sunken a little bit, you end up with quite a flaky, cracked top, but it means that the whole cake is completely smooth. And I'm going to show you how to decorate your cake with a mirrored ganache. So what I'm going to do is, I've got a cake board here. You can use a cake plate if you prefer. You lay it over the top of your cake, and then you upend your cake. Do this now. And then what you can do is very, very gently peel off the lining paper. Okay, this cake literally just had 30 minutes in the oven, and it was done. You can check it. All ovens are going to be slightly different. And don't worry, there is a little bit of the dome and there's a bit of a space at the bottom, but I wouldn't worry about that. It won't cause any harm. Right, ganache has to be the easiest topping you can make for a cake, and it is just totally delicious. So I'm just going to see where my bowl is, and I realise it's there. I'm just going to quickly wash the bowl, because I need to use the bowl that I had the egg yolks in to make my ganache. If you'll give me a moment. If you have a look at that cake, you can see that it is definitely cooked right the way through, but it's not overcooked, and it will be very light and delicious inside. Right, so now I have my washed and dried dish. Right, so this is microwavable dish, it's heat resistant. And what I'm going to do is pour in here roughly 3 fluid ounces of cream. Now, if you like your ganache to be more runny, you can add more cream, and if you like it to be thicker, you can add less cream, but I think about 3 ounces is about the right amount. So that's about 3 fluid ounces there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop that in the microwave for 30 seconds to get it hot. Now, after 30 seconds, if it's not really hot, I might give it a few more seconds. So I'm just going to pop that over there. Alan, are there any questions while I'm doing that?
In answer to... Sorry, in answer to the question about salt and eggs.
Yes.
Anne Stewart says salt allows the egg structure to break up and foam more.
Thank you, Anne. I always wondered. I'm so glad you told me that. In this dish here, I have 4 ounces, 125 grams of chocolate chips. These are dark chocolate chips. I've never made ganache with milk chocolate chips. I've never made the cake with milk chocolate chips. I'm not sure whether it would work because I think that it doesn't have enough cocoa solids in it. But frankly, if you're prepared to give it a go and you end up making it and it comes out fine, let me know. I'll be very interested. Right, I'm just going to check on my cream. See, it needs another 30 seconds. Nope, actually it doesn't. 10 seconds it needs. Right. Okay, I'm going to give my cream about another 10 seconds. I want it to be hot, but not boiling. Here we go. Right, let's have another 10 seconds. So, it's 40 seconds on high. And all I'm going to do now is I'm going to pour in my chocolate chips. There we go. And I'm going to give them a good stir. Right. I didn't measure out my cream, so it might be a little bit more than the 3 fluid ounces I told you. If I find, because I tend to just do it by the seat of my pants. If I find that I've actually added maybe too much cream and it's not thick enough, you can always add an extra few chocolate chips at the end. And firstly, you could always add a bit of cream to thin it out if you think it's too thick. You might need to heat it up a little. I hope you can see how quickly this is coming together. So what's happening is that the chocolate chips are melting into the cream. And the cream mix is getting thicker and glossier. It all melts. So can you see? Now, what I found is some people, they prefer to heat the chocolate and the cream together in the microwave and then put it on the cake. It will still work, but what you don't get is that lovely glossy finish. So I don't know if you can see what's happening now, but as the chocolate melts into the cream, it's getting thicker and thicker, and it isn't hot anymore. It's just the residual heat from the cream. Lovely. So here we go. I'm just checking to make sure that I've got rid of all of my lumps of chocolate. Like I say, if you haven't got chocolate chips, you can just have a block of chocolate and you can melt it. Now, here's an interesting thing. My sister-in-law, Becky Padwell, taught me this one. If you want to make this cake parav, you can make it with margarine instead of butter in the cake, and you can use parav cream, which you will use exactly the same way. You heat the cream up, 3 fluid ounces, heat it up until it gets to completely hot, but not completely boiling. You pour in your chocolate chips and stir them exactly the same way, and there you have a parav Queen of Sheba cake with a parav chocolate ganache. It looks fabulous, it tastes fabulous. It's not quite the same as making it with butter and cream, but it's still absolutely wonderful. There we go, and probably has, if you use margarine that's high in polyunsaturates, it's possibly a little bit healthier. But hey, cake's not meant to be healthy in my personal opinion. If you're going to have cake, you have cake. Right, what you need next to decorate your cake is a palette knife. So here I have my palette knife, and what I'm going to do, it's just the perfect texture now. This is the texture that you're looking for. It's unctuous, it's glossy, and it's thick enough that it's not all going to come pouring off the cake. Everybody's got different methods of how they do this, but my method tends to be, I just pour the lot onto the top of the cake. There we go. Taking care to leave a little bit of chocolate in the bowl for my son, who's just about to finish off his school day. He can come and lick out the bowl, because he's going to love that. Right, so now I've poured it all on the top of the cake. What I want to do is I'm going to start from the middle and gradually work my way outwards and allow the chocolate to drip over the edges, like so. Okay, see this? As it drips over the edges, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to smooth it off all the way around. Don't worry if it makes a bit of a mess, because you can take a damp paper towel, kitchen towel around the edges, and once everything's all dried off, you can smooth it off. So I'm just going to check to make sure. Now, if you really wanted to make it completely decadent, you could chop it in half horizontally through the middle and fill it with ganache and then top it with ganache. Frankly, I think that's overkill. This is a very lovely, rich cake. You actually only need a very small slice of this to be satisfied. It's wonderful. And there you have it. You now have a French chocolate cake with a mirrored glaze ganache. I'm just going to get a damp tea towel and I shall tidy up around the edges. And then I'm going to lay it open for questions and answers once I've checked on the soup to make sure that it's done. So what I will do at the end is I'm going to pop the soup into a bowl so you can see how it looks. So, here we go. I think that's pretty much neatened up. And there you have it. Right. So, I think that's as good as any opera cake that you'd find, or any Sacha torte that you would find. Right, so Q&A. First of all, would you like me to get the soup out of the pan and show you what it looks like in the bowl? If you would, I can just do that if you give me a minute. What do you think?
What we're going to do is going to make everybody a participant so everybody can see everybody and have a chat, if that's all right. And I'm going to, so I'm going to start with the way, this is not a, so we have to do this one at a time. So I'm going to invite Pasita Ziv first because she actually has a question, and you will need to put your video and mic on as you come on board.
Right, well, I'm just going to quickly get a bowl of soup out for you to show you what it looks like in the dish.
There you go. That's worked. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hazit, I love your background, Hazit. Hey.
Thank you very much. It's been lovely, and I can't wait to try it out. I was wondering if the ganache that you use to top the cake and decorate it is suitable for other applications like a fondue where you dip fruits. Or
yeah, you certainly could do. Yeah, you definitely could do. Absolutely. You'd be better to set it over a bowl of hot water, I would imagine, and then it would keep its liquid state because it will solidify eventually. Otherwise, you could actually add a little bit more cream to it to make it more runny, or if you're making it non-dairy, you'd use more of the par of whip. And the same thing. But yes, I think it would make a wonderful fondue. So absolutely. Right.
Thank you.
So people are being added onto the screen, so you just need to unmute yourself if you want to speak.
I'm just going to, while we're doing this, I'm just going to show you what the soup looks like. So here's the finished product of the soup. You can see that. I tell you, the smell is driving me insane. I'm going to get a spoon to show you how it looks on the spoon. You can always add less liquid if you want to make it thicker. There we go. There's the spoon. You can see this proper soup, but still very filling. Right. Has anybody else got a question to ask or a comment or want to say hello?
There we go. Yep, that's working. Where are we? Who's that?
Oh, hang on, Blanche, you need to unmute yourself.
Right.
Hello, Blanche.
Hello, that was really lovely. How much potato flour did you put in?
Oh, sorry, it was 2 ounces of potato flour, which is roughly 55 grams. I'm looking to see, 2 ounces is 55 grams of potato flour. Any other questions from anyone?
Everybody should be around if anybody wants to speak. Just unmute yourself or speak. No?
No other questions? No?
I think
Harvey? June?
Yes.
Is it June?
Yes.
Hi, June.
The cake looks fabulous. Does it freeze well? And would you freeze it without the ganache or freeze it with the ganache?
It freezes beautifully. It freezes beautifully with and without the ganache. I tend to freeze it without the ganache because it's much easier. Then you can just wrap it up in cling film or a plastic bag or a tub. And otherwise, if you want to freeze it, once it's actually already got its lovely shiny ganache topping on, you'll need to do it in a tub. Something like, let me show you. You'll need to do it in a dome, in a tub like this. Or what you'll do is you will mark up your beautiful ganache and it will no longer be shiny and mirrored. Okay? It does freeze beautifully.
Super, thanks.
You do.
Valerie did have a question and she's now unmuted if she wants to ask it.
Can you do sugar-free cake as well, Claire?
I don't know. I'm sure you could go online and find sugar-free cake recipe. I have never used this recipe sugar-free, but I imagine if you were to get sugar-free chocolate and if you could get some sort of sugar substitute that I know you can buy, I'm not going to mention any product names because I've never used them, but if you do use a sugar substitute, you could certainly give it a go. And then if you do that, tell me how it comes out. I'd be intrigued to know.
Yeah.
Right. So wait a minute. Sorry.
Any other questions?
Everyone's unmuted now, so you can just call out.
Hi, Claire. It's Gloria.
Hi, Gloria.
I must say, I've really enjoyed seeing your demonstration. I mean, everything was perfect. And that cake looks absolutely amazing. I'm definitely going to do it, but I'll do it with butter. I won't do it with the margarine. I think it looks really lovely. Well done.
Thank you very much, Gloria.
Hi, Claire.
Oh, hiya.
Thank you very much for everything. I really enjoyed Tuesday afternoons watching your...
Oh, thanks, Susie.
And the apple strudel was fantastic.
It looked wonderful, the one that you posted on Facebook.
Thank you. And hopefully I'll make the chocolate cake this afternoon.
Oh, yeah. Let me know how you get on.
Okay, thank you.
Claire?
Hi, Lorraine.
It's Alyssa. Hang on.
Oh, Alyssa, sorry.
Hi, I can't remember what I was going to say. Yeah, just thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. If I hadn't bumped into you the other night walking and talked about Harry's cake making, I would never have joined in and really enjoyed it. Thank you very much. I look forward to making it.
You're very welcome.
I'm sure it won't be as nice as yours, but it looked fabulous. So thank you.
Can I ask you all to post pictures of your cakes if you've made them, just so I can see what they look like?
That's a good idea.
Post them on the Leeds Jewish Community Facebook page. That would be great.
Can we see past demonstrations you've done? Is there anywhere we can actually see them, like your the strudel one? I'd like.
You can see. I'm afraid the apple strudel. Well, I did record it, but the recording was so appalling. I can't send it to you. I'm really sorry.
Hello. The apple strudel was last week, wasn't it?
Oh, was that last week?
Yes,
you're right.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry, last week.
So just everybody, for the moment, last week's was delayed because of a technical problem. Am I coming out all right, Claire?
I can hear you fine.
Right, sorry, I have a problem on my side. But they're going on the Millen website for the minute, which is millen.org.uk. And the apple strudel is there.
Oh, you're right, it is, and I actually watched it this morning, the video, and it, apart from the bit in the middle when my voice turns into a Dalek, it's very good. Any other questions? Any comments? Check to see whether my cake that's in the oven is ready yet. I had 15 minutes, so that's going to be a bit longer. Oh, thank you, Pazit. So any other questions before we say goodbye? Would you like to just see the cake and the soup one more time? I'm just going to show you one more time. The soup and the cake. Everybody knows what my family is having for dinner tonight. Any more questions before we say goodbye? Any more comments? Sorry, Daniel's just come in. He wants to lick the bowl out. There it is. I've left it for you. Any more questions?
Hello.
Claire.
Bye, Susie.
Thank you.
Questions? No? All right then. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining me today. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Next week, I'm not going to be doing one at 2 o'clock in the afternoon because the ex-client are going to be running a cheesecake bake-in, which is going to be at 8 o'clock in the evening. And if you look on the Facebook page, the Time Facebook page, my Facebook page, and the Legion Community Facebook page, you can find a link to be able to book your place on the next week. You'll be sent out the ingredients and you will be then invited to bake with Claire. And Rabbi Gilbert will be a learning session. So I'm going. And thank you.
You too. Yes. Hello.